Welcome once again to our workshop on critical reading. I hope that you will find this presentation a time well spent in getting engaged with the content of the workshop, that it would contribute invaluably in your critical, or rather in your academic literacy journey, drawing on the strength of this workshop on a related issue of critical reading, very important integral part of literacy practices at university. So I hope that it will open up that door of drawing on reading to empower our writing at university. But then how do we do our reading as university students is an important focal point of this workshop. I know that you are reading a lot in preparation for your assignments and also in writing out your perhaps responses to questions, be it an essay question or topic. But then your writing largely draws on what you would have read. As I said, key to this workshop is how is my reading at university. The topic is critical reading. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, students will be able to define the very topic term, critical reading. What is critical reading? Am I doing critical reading? When I read, do I read with a critical mind? I hope this workshop will open up that space where we engage in our reading programs critically with the content, so that we do not just find content to be transferred into our assignments without engaging with that content. So we also want to distinguish different cognitive levels of reading, thinking levels, that is cognitive levels. When I read, there are levels of it. Am I reading at level 1 or level 2 or level 3? Can I practice that, or by default, we are programmed to read at level 1 by default? Should I need some conscious effort to switch to level 3 reading? And what is level 3 reading? Because I need to analyze a text that I am reading before I use the ideas that are contained in that text. Number 3, differentiate between critical reader and a non-critical reader, right? What are the differences there? And know the characteristics of a critical reader. What are the characteristics of a critical reader? Right. Now, I want you to, based on the objectives outlined, you to perhaps say, these are my added perhaps hope in attending this workshop. I'm hoping that this workshop will open up some area of understanding in this or that aspect. So if you have expectations, I'll now pause to allow you to share those expectations, Ngozi and no more, so Precious. Sorry, Precious, I do not know how to pronounce your surname there, but then anyway, let us engage. What are the expectations that you bring into this workshop when we attend workshops? Okay, I can call you Musa. Thank you for making it easy for me, Precious. I will then just call you Musa going forward. So Musa and Kosi, what are your expectations besides the objectives that I have put on the screen? What are your expectations? Critical reading is the topic. What do you expect perhaps by the end of this workshop to have acquired, gained through the engagements? Maybe you can type in the chat box.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Musa.
I hope you guys are good. I'm also good and excited to be in this part of a lesson. So, what my expectations are, we have critical reading in the tutorial letter, right? And it's different when someone else is delivering the lesson to you than reading on your own. So, my expectations would be going deeper in the critical reading and also understanding it better than in the tutorial letter.
Okay, thank you, Musa. Understanding critical reading beyond the written word in the tutorial letter. Thank you very much. Let us move forward with it and understanding that you do have a topic like that in your module, but then it could be very different from what you have in the sense of content, but it adds to what you already have. It adds to what you already have. You know, you think of what in your module would be critical reader, what in your module would be critical reading. And you say, okay, this presentation, how will it add to what I already know about critical reading? And I'm hoping that it will demonstrate if those differences not necessarily in conflict with what you are doing, but in supporting what you are doing. Perhaps adding another layer to it or a different sort of perspective or a lens through which to look into the topic critical reading or aspect of critical reading. Now let's look at the first, the second, the third slide from the objective slide we have. Why do you read? Why do I read? There are reasons, of course, that you can actually give. And I just want to go straight to those reasons. You know, as a student, you usually would read to get information, isn't it? For information on something that you need to read about and use that information maybe to answer a question or to know something that you did not know before, right? But we also read to find out the latest developments in our field. You know, as on as learners who learn on an ongoing basis, you know, we talk of never giving up on learning, continually learning. Anyway, let us talk about this. Some answers that you may come up with are that I'm reading in order to get latest information in my module, okay, or in my field. I'm reading to get evidence that support or refute ideas, certain ideas. I have this idea that I'm getting from so and so, and I need evidence that either support that idea or that challenges that idea. So where do I go? I go to books, I go to articles to get that evidence. Um, so there are a number of reasons that we have uh, we can give for reading. Some I do know that they would say, I read for leisure. I read for leisure. I read to get motivated or to get more knowledge on a certain topic. What what is this thing? Maybe it's COVID. I want to know more about COVID. How is it transmitted between people? And what are the um, symptoms I want to know more about. So I'm reading with that in mind to know more about a certain condition. So we read for different reasons, really. Some would say to find out exactly how a certain piece of research was done. You are reading and you are doing an investigation on a particular topic, but then there was this, or there is this that was done before yours, and you want to know how it was done. So there are different reasons people engage in reading, but how do we do that reading is very important. How do we do? There are different reasons why we do it, but how do we do it is the big question that we can ask. Types of reading. I hope you are familiar um, with these kind of terms where we are saying we do intensive reading when we are preparing for the examinations. When we are preparing for our assignments, we do intensive reading, right? And we do this reading, which is very comprehensive. This kind of reading, which is very detailed. This kind of reading rather, which um, requires that I understand the text very well, because I know that I need this information to pass the assignment or pass the examination. So I do intensive reading. In the process, I even write things down, so that I help myself retain information. Okay. So I do intensive reading to prepare myself for the assignment or for the exam, because there is that important test that is coming. So I do it thoroughly. I do it line by line, intensive reading. I use even a dictionary to find out the meaning of new words. I analyze, I want to retain as much as possible of the information that I'm reading. That is intensive reading. But there's also extensive reading, on the other hand, where I'm reading large quantities of materials. Why? I'm doing it to obtain pleasure from engaging in that reading exercise. Extensive. I'm not going to be tested in the exam um, uh, uh, um, after reading. No, I'm reading for leisure. I'm reading just to get as much in out there, know more about the cultures, about the workings of certain technologies, about um, uh, areas that I have interest in, but not for examination or assignment reasons that are pressing. So I do extensive reading for that reason. You see, so what do you do when reading texts? Do you engage with text extensively? Do you engage with text intensively rather? So you check yourself when you are doing the reading. Sometimes we do extensive in preparation for exams, whilst we should be doing intensive. You know, when I am writing an examination, I have no choice but to intensively read the texts, the notes, the textbook, to retain the information as much as possible, help myself retain that information because I need it for the exams. So it's intensive reading. All right. But then I read something just to fill myself in with information that I need concerning a particular issue, not that I am having a PEPS session that requires that information to be perhaps used to answer or address the topic in an exam or in a test. No, but I'm doing it for leisure. That is extensive reading. But then anyway, when I do intensive reading, there are strategies, there are reading strategies. Hopefully this has would perhaps add to what you have as a topic in your module, Musa. The reading strategies which I use. The reading strategies that I use. I haven't yet spoken critical reading, but I'm just talking reading. Types of reading strategies. I've not yet moved into critical reading. I will get there. But then what are those reading strategies? In other words, the ways that you approach the reading text in order to help yourself understand that text. What are those ways? What are those ways? Right? I have this diagram here that when I get a reading text, Musa, when I have a reading text on my desk, textbook on my desk, okay. Right, so I was saying, Musa, that when you have a reading text before you on a desk and you are basically reading that, remember, I'm not yet at critical reading. I'm just talking reading. Reading for knowledge, reading information in order to retain and write the text, the test or assignment, send it, reading extensively, that is the different concepts introduced. But this particular reading that we are doing, we are very systematic about it. We want to retain as much as possible when we do intensive reading. You know, it is active reading. Intensive reading is very active. You saw there that the word retention is used. You want to retain as much as you can, right? The word retention is used here. Retaining every expression. So it is important. So how do I help myself to retain? You know, I'm using strategies there to retain the information that I am reading so that I don't read to forget. I read to remember. But I'm also, in my reading, I'm also thinking about how do I ensure that I retain as much as possible. I make predictions. I'm getting a reading text and I'm looking at the heading of the text, or I'm looking at the title of the text, or even a book, and I start actively writing down what I think this text is about. I make predictions, set some rather put some information down that which would perhaps be proven correct or wrong at the end of the reading, by making those predictions even beforehand, what the expectations, what I expect to read about based on the text. I asked, what are your expectations based on the topic critical reading? You say that I am having critical reading as part of my module. I therefore want to find out if this would further assist in uh, deepening my understanding of critical reading and how different it is. Is it helping me at all? How different it is from the workshop that pardon me, from the topic, that subtopic that I have in my module, critical reading. So that is your input regarding um, regarding your expectations, predictions of what this is about and how it would help me. But then I'm saying equally, when we do our own readings as students, we also want to retain and making predictions as part of our active reading engagement with the text helps us retain as much information as possible. So we make those predictions. We write down what we think the text is about or the reading passage is about. And having written that down, after we have read, we can go back to our predictions and say, how far off were we from what the text, the actual text is about, or how close are we, you see? So we make those predictions. Then two, we scheming for gist. We're scheming for gist. In other words, we also, in addition to making predictions, we scheme the text to get the gist of the text. In other words, we scheme it to get what the text is about, a sense of what the text is about. This is not, these are the strategies that we use, ways that help us to understand and retain as much as possible of what we are reading. So what do we do when we skim? We skim in order to get an overview. In other words, to get a general idea what the text is about. So are we reading every single word in the text when we're doing skimming? No. Skimming is reading to get the overview. How do you get an overview? You get an overview of a text by reading the first the heading of the text, second reading the topic sentences that begin each paragraph. You know, each paragraph has a topic sentence. So you read the first sentence that forms that introduces each paragraph in order to get the main idea of that paragraph. Remember, the topic sentence contains the idea of that paragraph. So it'll at least ultimately help us to understand what the whole text or passage is about, to get a gist. I'm not yet reading everything. I'm just reading certain sections of the text. And by so doing, I'm trying to get what the text is about. And again, all of this, because it's an active process, will be confirmed once I am reading thoroughly the text in order to get the details of the text or what is said in the text. But then we make predictions, what the text, what our expectations of the text are, what the text is expected to be about based on the title or heading. And we then scheme for overview to get a general idea what the text is about. And how do you do it? It's important that you know what is to skim. What do we do when we are skimming a text, for example? When we are skimming a text, we read the heading of the text and we read the topic sentences. We read the topic sentences. And when we read the topic sentences, we will then be able to know what, or get a general idea what the text is about. It's part of the active reading process. I want to pause and ask and ask if and ask Musa if you have had an opportunity to practice skimming as a strategy in your reading engagements or your reading activities.
Yes, I have. It depends what I'm reading and what I'm reading it for. For instance, if I'm reading a novel, I would want to skim first to find out what is happening. And most of the time, when I'm reading for leisure purposes, for fun, I would just skim, not going in depth with everything, especially stories, novels, and books like this. Most of the time, I would just skim. And also, during the beginning of the year, when you start with the new semester, you would go through the tutorial letters, you would skim what is all the subjects is all about before reading for understanding.
Okay, I get it. All right. You skim to get an overview. Thank you very much. You don't read thoroughly everything. You read certain things, and those certain things that you are reading give you an overview of what the text is about. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with me. Right. So beyond the skimming is scanning for details. Here we're looking at little details that help us to make connections with what we thought the text is about in order to further get to the point of us having a confirmation of what the text is about when we read it for details. Of course, here you're looking at such information as the names, dates, important names, important dates, words written in italics. That is part of scanning in order to have to formulate an idea of what the text is. An active process. I want to confirm what I think the text is about or disconfirm it. Drawing inference. What is drawing inference? Drawing inference is where I draw a conclusion based on what I have read. It's a reading strategy. It's a very important reading strategy. When we do it, we are basically engaging actively to say that the meaning of this is this. You know, I've read this. I'm not memorizing what I don't know the meaning of. You know, I know what it means. Therefore I can keep it and retain it because I know what it means. So I retain based on the meaning that this conveys to me, and I understand what it means. I mean, how do you retain what you don't understand? And it is difficult because it means you are parroting it and you want to give it back without really understanding exactly what you are reading about and what how the text or what the text is doing or what the reading material is doing. So you draw inference as well as part of the reading process, which is very, very important. And when you draw inference, you do it in order to get to the meaning of what you are reading. In other words, you draw, you make conclusions about the text based on what the text is giving. You say, therefore, this is what is implied. This is what is meant. Therefore, this is what it means. Therefore, this is what it says. You know, you do that. And then the other thing that you see there is, as I'm reading the text, the reading passage, as I'm reading it, there are new words that I haven't seen before. Instead of opening a dictionary to find the meaning, yes, we can do that, but I can still use the context to guess the meaning of those words. We call that word attack skill. In other words, I read a sentence and I find a difficult word used there, which I have not seen before, but I use words which are used together with that word to unlock the meaning of that word. This is called guessing the meaning of words as I am reading. This helps me not to pause from the flow of the reading and consult a reference book and try to unlock the meaning or find the meaning of that word. I can do it, it's fine, but I can still guess the meaning of the word successfully using context, the words that surround that difficult word. So I also am self-monitoring. Step number 6, self-monitoring. In other words, am I retaining? Am I understanding? Am I moving forward? How do I do that? Annotations are very important. In other words, I check if I still understand by asking questions. What is this about? What is he saying here? And I try to check myself if I am flowing along the text. And that self-monitoring helps because I might be reading, but not understanding what the text says, what information the text is giving. And then you also summarizing what you have read. You write it using your own words. Using your own words is important because when you use your words, you are showing that you have understood it. You are confident about the text, so much confident that you can even express that idea or those ideas that are in the text using your own words. Now, overall, I can sit back and say, this text is saying this. These are the things that the text is saying. And I'm saying what the text is saying using my own words. I am able to use my own words because I have formulated meaning of the reading text. I have grasped what is meant by what the writer is saying in the text. And because I've done that, I am able to now say what the text is saying using my own words. If I'm not able to tell the next person what the text is saying, then I am not very clear about the text that I've read. I must be able to say that using my own words. Of course, I can quote certain sections of the reading to sort of illustrate a point, but I must be able to say and use my own words in so doing. These are the strategies that perhaps are sort of high school kind of strategies that are always part of presentations on reading, to say not always, maybe most of the time you'd find that we are advised to unlock the meaning of words using word attack skill or guessing the meaning of the words. We are advised to do the skimming to get an overview of the text. We are advised to make predictions and verify our predictions, to monitor our grasp of the text, to also summarize the information by writing down key points using our own words to establish our understanding of that text, whether we have understood it or not. This is what generally we would do when we are reading, to understand a text, to retain information on a particular text. But we're not yet there on critical reading. I want you to use this as a way of perhaps getting information for academic writing, for writing those essays, right? Now, if I have an article that I am asked to consult, use the information or ideas contained in that article to write this particular essay. Now, I must read that article, right? And I must read to understand what the writer says. And I must be able to use express the ideas of the writer using my own words, because When I do so, I can accentuate my understanding, or I also prove my understanding that I can even express the ideas in different ways using my own ways or my own words, and to prove my understanding of the text. And once I have that understanding, I now can transfer or use some of the information in my assignment. And when I do that in my assignment or essay, I'm doing it uh, understanding what should be included, what is relevant from drawing on what I have read, what is relevant and what is irrelevant, what will help strengthen my essay and what will weaken my essay, and what should I leave out, what should I include. Why I don't include everything? Because not everything is relevant to what the focus of the question or the essay is. So I use what I am reading to address or to answer the question that is asked. Of course, sometimes we do it for leisure, as you have correctly pointed out, that or rather indicated that we are um, reading for leisure. And when I do it for leisure, I sometimes will just skim it and move on to something else because it's not that important for me, although it is in the sense of getting a sense of the news. If I'm skimming a newspaper, get a sense of what is happening in the country. But it is not something that I can spend hours on, whilst I have so much to do out there. So those are the strategies that I have. But as I've said, we not yet critical reading or foundation in terms of reading. What do we do? What types of reading do we do? And how generally do we do our reading? But one thing that stands out here is that reading is an active process. Reading is an active process. It's not passive. It's not like, okay, I'm just going to read, try, regurgitate, and then reproduce the same information. It's an active process where you read to retain, where you read to understand, where in the process you question, where in the process you agree. It's an active process, right? Next is an activity and in preparation for critical reading. And of course, I am presenting this in order to prepare the students to write essays. They need to read in order to write. We read to write. So we do the strategies. Why? We need relevant information in order to write and to write successfully. But then here is the point. I know I'm only having you, Musa. This activity is intended at testing your reading. How do you read? I want to do it by asking you to respond to the following. After reading the short text, that is extract B by Beatty, after reading it, I want you to write down, share your thoughts about the text. What do you think about Beatty's information given by Beatty? You share your thoughts about the text, né? And then you write your thoughts, your understanding in the chat box, okay? And from there, I'll tell you what next should be done. It's a text, short one by Bailey. What are your thoughts about the text? And I will be able to tell you how is your reading after you have actually shared that information with me in the chat box. But Musa, you say, I agree with the text on dealing with dangerous prisoners and not dangerous prisoners. So you say you agree differently because such behaviors on a dangerous prisoner can have an effect on not so dangerous prisoners. Okay, so I agree. What are your thoughts? So you agree with the position of the writer in terms of how the dangerous and not so dangerous prisoners should be dealt with. So what you have done Musa, is this. You have read, and after reading, you have processed the information and which leads you to a conclusion that you agree or disagree with a certain aspect of the text. Okay, so you are not necessarily saying what the text is saying. You know, in sharing your thoughts, you are not telling us what the text is saying. In other words, you're not giving us or reporting to us what the text is saying. You are instead giving us what your position on the text is. Do you see? In sharing your thoughts, perhaps you're influenced by the question, share your thoughts. In sharing your thoughts, you're giving us what your position, you're sharing your position, sort of like what, you know what the text is saying, but you've gone beyond just saying what the text is saying. You've gone beyond that. But you are giving us, based on the question perhaps, what your take of the information is. So that is what you have done. And you can see that I wanted you to read with a certain view in mind. Okay? So you are given an assignment topic and you are reading with a particular view, guided by the question that you are expected to address. But oftentimes as readers, we don't know why we are made to read certain text in certain ways. Sometimes you read looking for information in order to quote that information as the answer because of the question. So you see, reading happens, but we want you to read, or the questions require that you read the text in certain ways. Sometimes I want you to read the text critically, you know, but I don't tell you that, or the question doesn't say you are being tested of critical reading skills, ability to read critically, but the question tests that ability, you know. So it's important you, as a student who is registered for a module, a teaching module, to note this, because going into the field, you will be asking questions, but you see the questions have an intention. So you test their reading, but then you test their reading at different levels, So usually what happens is people, when they read to tell us what the text is saying, to report. They read to report. They struggle to read beyond the text. You know, they struggle to read beyond the text. What I mean by that, you will see what I mean. Between the lines, they struggle to do that. And you test their ability to do that by the questions that you set for them to answer. And so the topic, of course, the title is, pardon me, the topic of this workshop is critical reading. And ultimately, we want to get the students to do critical reading. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. right? To get to critical reading. And that's what we want to do. So let us look at the next slide. Thank you for answering the question. And the next slide is what the text says and what the text does. At what point are we critical readers? At the point when we are only saying what the text says, or at the point when we are able to say what the text says and what the text is doing? Okay, now let us look at the following. What is the text saying? It says that prisons are universities of crime. This is what it's saying. It says that prisons, they reinforce criminal behavior. That's what the text is telling us. So I can give this information because I'm just reporting what I see. But when I start asking what that text is doing to me as the reader, now I am beginning to do critical reading. I am beginning to do critical reading. What is the text doing? You see, the text is not only saying, but the text is also doing some things to us as readers. You see, it's doing something because you say, I agree, it did something to you. So if we are able to detect what the text is doing, we are beginning to get to the level of reading critically. Now, what the reader is being persuaded to do through this text is that the reader accepts the idea that prison strengthens criminal behavior. The intention of the text is to persuade me. This is what it's doing, the text is doing, to persuade me to accept that prisons can strengthen criminal behavior. Instead of solving crime, it can strengthen crime. It can cause even worse crimes. So he wants or she wants me to believe that they are not the ideal place for dealing with criminals, the prisons, because they can worsen the criminal behavior. All right. Now, what is my take on this? You see, I am reading with that in mind. What is he doing to me? What is he doing to me? What is he trying to get at? Okay. Or what is he doing to the reader? Not necessarily me, but to the reader. Maybe not me, but the reader. What is he doing to the reader? The intention is to cause the reader to do 1, 2, 3 things. And when I write those things down, I am getting to the word which is not written, but it is implied. So it's critical reading. I'm getting what the text is, getting to the point where the text, I know what the text is doing. I know what the intention of the writer is. I'm not only relying, or I'm not only able to give what the text is saying, I'm also able to tell what the text is doing, what the intention, what the underlying meanings are. Musa, I want to take you to you being in class with the learners, and you are making them to read an article, a DA article, an EFF article, an ANC article. And it's nearing elections and time, and you want them to understand that a text is not only saying things, it's also doing things to the reader. And in getting them to the point of detecting what the text is doing, you frame questions. on what the text is doing. Well, intention is one of the questions that you will ask. Do you agree is one of the questions that you will ask. In that way, you are actually getting them to become critical readers, to either agree, disagree, to comment on the text, to be critical readers, not just to take in, but to be able to engage with the information that the text is giving at a point of agreement, disagreement, or just generally sharing their own lived experience in comparison to what the text is saying. Right. So what the text is doing is how here the how question refers to how is he convincing the readers? This is what he's doing to convince me as the reader, the text producer. You see, he uses phrases such as universities of crime. He terms prisons universities of crime. He doesn't refer to them as sort of prisons uh, or just them being known as prisons. He adds another layer to prisons and says they are universities of crime. A university is a place where you learn sophisticated ways of doing. So he wants me to think of prisons as really terrible places which we should, as society, rethink. Universities of crime, engage and come up with ideas, solutions, because these are places where crime, more sophisticated ideas about crime are learned, because the university. So he uses the word university to refer to prison, where sophisticated ways of doing crime are learned. This is how he's persuading me. This is how he's trying to change my views, my viewpoints about prisons. And he says they reinforce, they strengthen criminal behavior. See, these are words that are very persuasive. It is claimed, meaning that it may not be true. It is claimed that somewhere he uses the phrase "it is claimed," or rather the clause "it is claimed." Maybe where the prisons are claimed to be corrective centers, that it is claimed, meaning that there is no evidence to that. So he is discrediting this view that is held out there that these are places where perhaps a prisoner might come out a different person, a much more resourceful person in terms of building communities. So it is claimed is what he uses. May be true, maybe, not it is. It says may be true in a minority of cases. He's not saying it is true, So the claim that is being made about prisons, it may be true. So it's not like a forceful, it is true. It's not an absolute statement where he would use it is true that this is the case. No, he uses maybe. This maybe is not showing a high degree of certainty. Not showing a high degree of certainty about what the prisons can. Yes, it may, but it is not. We are not certain that it will do that. So where he discredits prisons, he uses words that are very doubtful about the effectiveness of prisons. This is what he's doing. He's trying to persuade people to rethink prisons, role of prisons in society. Okay, so this is what he is doing. Do I agree with his perspectives? Perhaps I can agree or disagree depending on my beliefs. The majority of the prisoners are not dangerous. Look, he says majority of prisoners are not dangerous. He's making a valid point. Perhaps we don't know. This is majority, not all of them are dangerous. The majority of them are not dangerous. So why take them to the university of crime if they are not dangerous? He's actually saying, he's putting a thought in me that I should be thinking of alternative places where I would take offenders, because they are not criminals, all of them, and they're not dangerous. Okay, so the text is positioning me and you in a certain way. It is really moving us to take a certain position about prisons, to be negative about the sort of role that it is understood in society to be the role fulfilled by prisons. That, look, rethink this role. It might not be exactly what prisons are doing in society. It could be different. Remember when I started, I said cognitive levels of reading. I've already now introduced to some little taste of what critical reading does. You know, when you move into critical space of reading, when you start asking what the text is doing to the reader, you start asking that question. When you start asking those questions, what the text is doing to the reader, you are getting into the critical reading frame. But three levels of reading. Three levels of reading. We read to get the following, to reproduce what the text is saying. Okay, that is the cognitive level of thinking that we engage with, that we have, where we are reproducing the information given in the text. That is level one, sort of, or level one of reading. The reader knows what the author says. The reader knows what the text says, but not what he meant or she meant by what he says or what he said. So, but to tell you what it says, I will. But what it means for me, or what it means to the reader, reading between the lines is another level. It's a higher level. Reading between the lines. Here, you draw inference. You make conclusions from what is read. You draw conclusion. I mean, I'm reading, and I was able to do that. I was able to draw conclusion in column 2, what the text does. I say it is positioning me, or the reader, to accept the idea that prisons strengthen criminal behavior. This is a conclusion that I've arrived at after reading the text. And how is he convincing me? I give evidence of how it is actually convincing. So I am actually being positioned to see prisons negatively by the text. Well, I'm not going to be convinced by the text to look at prisons differently, but I'm able to detect what the intentions of the text producer are. It's very important skill, critical reading skill. So when you are drawing inference, reading between the lines, when you're drawing inference from what is read, you are discovering the implications. This requires critical thinking and analysis of what the writer really meant. Analysis of what the writer really meant. Okay, so when you read beyond the lines, this is the highest form of reading. It adds to reading between the lines. When you read beyond the lines, you make judgments. It's what we're doing, of course, making a judgment to say, this is a bad text, this is a good text. I agree with the text. Well, when you're doing agreement, you are basically reading between the lines. But when you start making comments that are judging the validity of the text, when you are judging the suitability of the text, when you are judging appropriateness, when you are judging authenticity of the text, validity of the ideas of the text. When you are that judge of the text, you are reading beyond just what is written on the lines. You are reading beyond the lines. And we want to get students to do that, because when we ask questions in the exams, we test these levels of reading. But we don't tell the students that we are testing the higher levels of reading by these questions. But there are questions which are framed or in such a way that, or formulated in such a way that they test that higher level of reading. Here, I want you to evaluate the text. I want you to apply what is read. And this requires critical judgment, critical judgment of the text, critically judging the text. Are we doing these skills or performing these skills every day? Yes, I suppose we are, but I'm conscious that we are actually doing it, because when we are in this module, rather this workshop, we get to now see, okay, there are questions that test these levels of thinking, but those questions don't say that this is where I want you to become a critical reader. But indeed, this is how you get learners to become critical readers. This is how to get myself to be a critical reader, and not just to flow with the text, knowing what it says, but to really think about what really this means for me. It must get to the point where I say the meaning. It must get to the point where I evaluate the behavior or the ideas and comment on those ideas. It must get to that point, because I am actively thinking about what is said, and thus I am reading the text critically. So it requires critical judgment to read beyond the lines. I hope you see the differences between what it says and what it does. How, when you say what it does, you enter into reading between the lines and reading beyond the lines. But when you say what it says, you are reading the lines only. And we want to move students to read between and beyond the lines. With these few words, I would like to say thank you, and once again, good night.